Quick, somebody call Christopher Walken and tell him we need more cowbell. Yards after catch. We got all that and a little bit of land yap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at a couple of big things, a couple of big themes going into training camp. I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be concerned just yet about the silence when it comes to Alvin Kamara's contract disputes thus far heading into training camp. We're going to take a look at how an offense can add yards after catch and why adding yards after catch to this New Orleans Saints offense would be pivotal for its success and also elevating Derek Carr to the top of his game. We got all that and much more coming up for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you as always for making us your first listen of the day every day and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed at Game Time. So if the New Orleans Saints want to take their offense to the next level in 2024, yes, motion will be a big part of it. Klint Kubiak's new system will be a big part of it. Play action will be a big part of it. The offensive line has to play a big part in it. But I think one of the other things that the New Orleans Saints can truly benefit from, and we've discussed this on the show before, but I have some research to back it up, some numbers, things like that, our nerdy deep dive to wrap up the week, is going to be yards after catch. The New Orleans Saints were not the strongest yards after catch team last year. In fact, they were one of the worst. They only have one player on the roster, one wide receiver on the roster, or at least had. This player isn't actually on the roster anymore. It's Lynn Bowden. He was the only player last year to average more than 4 yards after catch per catch, and he only had 11 catches for 83 receiving yards. Chris Olave was at the top there at exactly 4 yards. So Bowden being the only one to exceed 4 yards. The New Orleans Saints wide receivers had some of the least broken tackles in the NFL as well. And so I want to highlight how and why this has an impact on not only an offense, but specifically too, how it impacts Derek Carr and the success that we've seen from the better years of his career as compared to 2023, which was not an unsuccessful year at all back in 2023. Don't want to say that, but there was a big time drop in yards after catch average, and it had a bit of an impact on his overall stats. According to our friends over at FTN Fantasy, Aaron Schatz, who again I'm working on getting on the show next week, does some of my favorite analytics in football, DVOA, all that good stuff. Stuff that NFL coaches have actually openly praised because it takes into consideration things like game situation, all that. Just really, really smart football stuff. So we'll get into that hopefully next week. But one of the things that he ranked when it came to Derek Carr in his recent kind of fantasy guide was what his average yards after catch over the course of the past 5 seasons looked like. And what you can see is a precipitous drop of over 1 yard per catch not being added on by receivers. So in 2019, he averaged 5.9 yards per catch. This was the peak of, I believe, Darren Waller, but certainly Hunter Renfrow. This was the peak of what those guys were doing at that time in 2020. That dropped a little bit, but not bad, to 5.6. Last year in 2023, with the New Orleans Saints offense, it was 4.5 yards after catch per reception on average. So that's an entire yard less per completed pass last year. If you look at that in terms of how many passes Derek Carr completed last year, that would have put him over 4,000 yards simply by adding 1 yard after catch more on each one of those receptions. Now, that's a really simplistic way to look at it, but that's one of the ways that I'm choosing to look at it. So the way that I would look at it here is in terms of his completions, in terms of the passes that he completed last year, he completed 375 passes. He was just beyond 100 or just under 120, 130 yards short of going over 4,000 yards in last year's offense. So you get a little bit more yards after catch on some of these other plays, and then all of a sudden you're in an entirely different tax bracket in terms of your production if you're Derek Carr, and therefore probably an entirely different tax bracket in terms of an offense as well. Maybe a team that instead of being top 10 in offense could have moved into top 8, could have moved into top 7, right? So these are the reasons why I'm highlighting why even just a little bit of an improvement with yards after catch could actually go a really long way for this offense and get Derek Carr back to what were some of his better years as a quarterback. And again, not that 2023 was bad, but just simply there were better years before that. What I also want to highlight is where Derek Carr ranked when it came to yards after catch from his receivers, 33rd in the NFL. So he was outside of starting territory in terms of what the average yards after catch he was getting. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of where that was, as I mentioned, only one wide receiver, exceeded 4 yards after the catch per attempt. Now, this isn't just about Derek Carr. This isn't just about the wide receivers. This is also about the system. And there's some good news here when it comes to what the New Orleans Saints have done, because that was the Pete Carmichael system last year. Now the New Orleans Saints are moving into the Klint Kubiak system, the Shanahan system, which again, I'll remind you, is not just Kyle Shanahan's system. It's Mike Shanahan's system, which he created next to Gary Kubiak, who is Klint Kubiak's father. So uniquely positioned is Klint Kubiak to bring this into New Orleans, even though he only spent actually 1 year with Kyle Shanahan. He's got the bloodline, if you will. So 6 of the 8 Shanahan systems and or Shanahan disciples that were at the top of their game last season, those offenses, 6 of 8 of them ranked within the top 12 when it came to yards after catch. That's good news for the New Orleans Saints that they could potentially move into that category, because they were not top 12. They were not top 20. They were towards the bottom of the league when it came to that. So that's a massive potential leap forward. And even those that ranked outside of the top 12 in that metric, Green Bay, Minnesota, they still would have been improvements from where the New Orleans Saints were last year. So no matter what, you're looking at an improvement there. So that's one of the reasons why you go after a Shanahan style offense, a Shanahan system, is because you want the motion, you want the play action, you want those 2 wide receiver sets, the similar looks, the creative, innovative things that you do, but also you want the yards after catch. And this offense helps to breed that. How exactly does it help to breed that? That's what I want to dive into next, because believe it or not, it's got a lot to do with the run game. But beyond that, it's also got a lot to do with just simply having better communication and better understanding of how to finitely find your receivers in the best possible situations. And the system has a lot more to do with that than just the players. Let's break that down next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The same formula that's built for winning championships will help you keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything that you need to be able to level it up to peak performance as well, whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or conversion, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 parts and accessories for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for at ebaymotors.com. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you want at the prices that you need, you're going to be able to find everything that you're looking for at eBay Motors. So go and check them out today and keep your ride or die alive with ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit available only to U.S. customers. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints can use a lot more yards after catch in 2024. And adding that isn't really the hardest task, as you might imagine. We appreciate you so much. As always, make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Don't forget to also go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream. If you're tired of all the yelling and screaming that you find at some of those other networks, go and check out Locked On Sports Today and make the switch. Programmed to bring you all the biggest stories around the world of sports from the local experts that know the teams the best. Head over to check out Locked On Sports on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today, and you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what are some ways that the New Orleans Saints can inject some more of this yards after catch into their offense? Well, I want to start off with the one thing, well, not the one thing, but the big thing that the wide zone offense is predicated on in the first place, and that is the run game, particularly the wide zone run game. So we talk about the wide zone run game. What we're talking about is these stretch runs, these outside zone runs that go to outside the tackles. What that does is that it stretches a defense laterally with your run game. Starts to pull folks out of the box, starts to really challenge sideline to sideline what a defense can do. Over the course of time, when that is effective, what that starts to do is create a lot of space in the middle of a defense, giving you the opportunity to then be able to attack in space, not just on the perimeter, not just in the boundary of the offense / defense, but also opens up some space in the middle of the field as well. It's a great thing to be able to take advantage of. And one of the big things that will allow the New Orleans Saints to be able to find some of the consistency as well as some of the kind of jolt that they're looking for when it comes to this element of the game. It allows you to be able to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers in position to make plays. Now, look, some receivers are simply yards after catch receivers. Other receivers are simply not yards after catch receivers. Some guys are better before the catch, route running, creating separation, what they can do at the stem, utilizing leverage, all these other things, a la Chris Olave. Others can be returners with the football in their hands, a la maybe a Rashid Shaheed. Alvin Kamara has some of that ability, of course, as well. So how are you able to maximize that? Utilizing the run game by stretching and challenging that defense laterally, sideline to sideline, will give you more opportunities to be able to get some of that going in all areas of the field, as opposed to simply having to rely on the boundary and the deep ball all the time for the big play. And that's where the New Orleans Saints were a lot of 2023. You saw a lot of targeting where Derek Carr was close to the line of scrimmage, deep downfield, not a lot in the middle of the field, something I griped about all season, but we've already started to see a bit of an adjustment towards attack in the middle of the field over the course of like mini camps, OTAs, stuff like that. And then not a lot in the intermediate area, already seen some adjustments in there as well. So opening and stretching out that defense a little bit does give you the chance to be able to take advantage more of attacking the middle cavity of a defense, attacking the intermediate areas of the field. I think the other thing that you're looking for is just altogether the split between greater support from the scheme as well as greater separation being created by the individual. So there's a scheme, which then, not only are you talking about what the run game can do for you in the passing game, but how are you scheming up your receivers? What are the route combinations that you're using? How are you using motion pre-snap to draw the attention of a safety? How are you utilizing play action to maybe pull a safety down so that you can get a receiver up over the top and they have a lot of green grass for all the yards after catch you could ever imagine in those situations? Those are going to be the other things where the support of the system will also have to take place beyond just the run game, but also in that passing game. So when you're creating concepts like dagger concepts, where you have one receiver on the outside running a fly or just a go route down the field, and then you have a player underneath that's running an out, if you're able to create a conflict defender by the safety that's trying to bracket over the top, that might either crash down to the out route, which then gives you the opportunity to go to the go route, or maybe pulls the depth of one of those corners a little bit further because of the go route. And then you have the opportunity to attack the out route at the sideline, maybe be able to turn up and pick up a couple extra yards after the catch, things like that. So how are you utilizing some of those route combinations to create conflict defenders? And it's not just about the wide receivers in their routes. It's also about the combinations of what you can do with a tight end attacking the seam, with a running back attack in the middle of the field, or the out on an option route. A running back attacking the perimeter or the boundary of a defense on a wheel route, while your outside receivers running a post route to pull everything else into the middle of the field, while your running back gets behind the linebacker that's trying to stay with them downfield, so on and so forth. So a lot of it also comes down to like how you're scheming up these players. This is some of my favorite football talk stuff. Hope you're ready to nerd out with me. Hope you're nerding out with me already. But it also does come down to the individual. Can the individual receiver create enough nuance in their route stem to be able to garner more separation after the break, right? And so the break being, you always kind of push vertically. You want to convince every defensive back, every cornerback on the outside, you want to convince them that you're running a go route. You're trying to sell the heck out of you just flying straight down the field. And if you can get that cornerback to commit, flip their hips, and get ready for you to try to run 75 yards downfield. It gives you the opportunity then to be able to take advantage of the leverage. This is something Chris Olave does incredibly well. And then either cut back towards the quarterback on a comeback, cut back towards the outside on a hitch, break towards the outside for an out route, break towards the middle of the field on a post or on a dig, all of those things. So you got to sell that, right? So what you do at the break is where you change or commit to your the go route that you're already trying to sell off the line of scrimmage. And then can you create separation off the line of scrimmage? What's your release package look like? Do you have different types of releases? Can you work off of press coverage when a DB tries to put their hands on you? This is another thing that Chris Olave does really well. A lot of what Chris Olave does really well is before the catch and stuff like that. And so you're seeing a little bit of a turn and a change in terms of his mentality after the catch. He's probably not going to be the guy that's going to, break off a big run, evading and slipping tackles and stuff like that. Debo Samuel bouncing off of corners, which is so fun to watch on like the new receiver show and stuff like that. But I don't think you're going to see that in New Orleans. But if you're able to catch a pass 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage and turn it into a 10-yard game, just as valuable. So I think things like that, which we've seen a little bit more of from Chris Olave, I think goes a long way. I think the other individual thing that happens is what's the ball placement? And so this is where I think more finely tuned ball placement. This isn't about does Derek Carr throw an accurate football or not? He does. This is about, is he accustomed to Chris Olave's speed? Is he now accustomed to Rashid Shaheed's speed? I think you started to see some of that fine tuning start to happen towards the end, or not happen, but really settle in, find its rhythm at the end of the season last year. You saw the big connections down the field and giving these guys more opportunities, the trust that developed there. I think that's another big part of it. So when you're running a slant, which Derek Carr did not throw the best slant routes last year, right? A lot of balls going behind receivers, things like that. Some of that is just miscalibration. If it is miscalibration, are they calibrated now, right? And how does this offense, which is kind of predicated on timing in its passing game, going to help you be able to do that? Lastly, I think lateral movement of the offense is big as well. So when I talk about lateral movement, I don't mean flying vertically up and down the field. I mean, what are you doing horizontally across the field? So when you run the outside zone, play action, roll out, flip over the right side, come back over to the opposite side of the field. So you fake the run to the right, but then the quarterback rolls out to the left. And then you've got three routes that are coming from the right side of the field to the left side of the field, one route going from the left side of the field to the right side of the field. And then all of a sudden you have a levels concept going to the favor of the quarterback and where the quarterback is running, so that you can kind of choose, okay, that DB has too much depth. I can't throw that. This DB doesn't have enough depth, so I can throw the short route. Or both DBs have too much depth. I can throw the intermediate route, so on and so forth. I think that's the other thing that you're trying to do too, is get folks moving laterally, because then you're getting the ball in their hands, in stride, moving full speed, get them the opportunity to turn upfield and go and pick up more yards as well. So that's, I think, the other thing. So look, it's not rocket science, right? It's not rocket surgery, as a good friend of mine just recently said. It is something that can very easily be added to an offense if everything is churning and if everything is pointing to one direction, which feels like where this New Orleans Saints offense is headed under Klint Kubiak in 2024. All right, that's going to wrap up our yards after catch conversation. Coming up next, I want to revisit Alvin Kamara's contract dispute and tell you why, even though things have been all quiet on the home front here recently, that might actually be a pretty good thing. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints and running back Alvin Kamara have been gridlocked in a contract dispute that's really based on 2025 guarantees more than it is about anything for 2024, I imagine. And it's been quiet for a while since Alvin Kamara left mandatory minicamp day 3, the final day of mandatory minicamp during practice. And that might actually be a good thing that it's been quiet. Let me explain why. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here for another episode. Don't forget, we will be back with you on Monday, your team every day. So coming up on Monday, look, there's not a lot of spots up for grabs for the New Orleans when it comes to their top 22. They're starters, but there are some young defenders that could potentially make the conversations a little bit more interesting during training camp. We'll break all that down as we take a brief look at what position battles there might be available during training camp when it comes to some of the major shakeups that could happen on the roster. So we got coming up for you on Monday. For now, I want to take a look by wrapping up today's show at Alvin Kamara. As I mentioned, it's been all quiet on the home front. Last thing that we heard was that he was there for a walkthrough, minicamp day 3, and then gone, poof, disappeared. We saw him in the parking lot before practice. He was fine. The last that we heard from Dennis Allen, Klint Kubiak, folks that we talked to, was that they hadn't gotten the opportunity to talk to Alvin Kamara since then, right? Or up to that point. I'm sure they've had many a conversation between then and now. And you might be worried that you haven't heard about how the Saints and Alvin Kamara have resolved all the issues and have gotten a contract done. And even though you haven't heard that, and even though that hasn't happened, to be clear, I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing, right? Because it doesn't mean that it's not on the way. It doesn't mean that things are going poorly. It could just literally mean that everybody took the time between minicamp and training camp off, like they're supposed to take the time between minicamp and training camp off a little bit, right? Now, of course, no one ever really takes it off. They all get ready. They all go and work out. They train. They stay in shape. The coaches maybe go away for a little while, but then they're back on the grind, working together and working on what they want to do, what the install is going to look like in training camp, getting ready for training camp and all that stuff. So there's never really that much time off for these guys, fortunately and unfortunately. Fortunately for a fan, because you want them to be doing the best thing that they can. Unfortunately for them, because they're human beings and they deserve a little bit of respite every now and then. The silence is not surprising. Here's why I think the silence can actually be good. Bad news travels quickly in today's media, right? Bad news kind of rushes out. If things weren't going particularly great for Alvin Kamara and his camp in the conversations with the New Orleans Saints, what's to stop his camp from leaking information to national reporters and things like that to put a little bit of pressure on the New Orleans Saints? Oh yeah, the New Orleans Saints and Alvin Kamara are far apart, far apart. You've heard that about a bunch of other conversations. I mean, look at the way that everything is playing out so publicly in the contract negotiations between San Francisco and Brandon Ayuk. Whose side are you hearing more of in the media? Brandon Ayuk's. Way more of Brandon Ayuk's side in the media, right? Because that's part of the leverage. That's part of leveraging. This negotiation between the New Orleans Saints and Alvin Kamara has not gone to public posturing. That is good news. That is very, very good news. Because it means that either the conversations just simply aren't happening right now, which would not be the end of the world. Because look, they're going to have the conversations when they're all in the same place for training camp. They might have said, look, we're not going to deal with this right now. Go away, get rest, get ready for training camp. We'll have this conversation when everybody comes back for training camp. Take a couple days, bang it out, bam, cool, good, right? Or they've continued conversations, and the conversations, even if not going perfectly well, because look, Alvin Kamara is not going to get a version of this deal that makes him 100% happy or that makes Alvin Kamara's camp 100% happy. That's really the thing, right? And then, because Alvin Kamara is not negotiating his own contract. He's not sitting down with Mickey Loomis and going, man, I don't know, Mickey, ain't enough zeros up in here. That's not him. He's not doing that. He's got people that are doing that. They take care of that. He gets the phone call. Hey, what do you think? Or whatever. Or, hey, this is happening. Great. Perfect. Let me know where to go, what to sign, how many times to sign it, and, when the money hits my account. That's how I would be if I were him. Just tell me when the money's in my account. So when it comes down to, and even though that's not actually the issue, the issue here is probably guaranteed money for 2025 more than it is actually what's hitting his account now. But we're having fun. So in that case, even though you're not going to get 100% what Alvin Kamara's camp wants, you're not going to get 100% of what the New Orleans Saints wants. That's what a negotiation is. You're going to find something in the middle. And maybe Alvin Kamara is a little bit happier than the Saints are. Maybe the Saints are a little bit happier than Alvin Kamara is. Or maybe they both walk away feeling like, got him. I mean, that's really your best case scenario, right? Is that both parties negotiate so much, so hard, and work together in the midst of that negotiation that they both end up walking away going, suckers, got him. That's the best case scenario, right? And so in any negotiation, not just this specific negotiation. But if that wasn't the case and things were going poorly, and they're shouting and, they're just not seeing eye to eye, it would be everywhere at this point. Now, of course, I'm putting this out on Friday. Friday is the ultimate NFL news dump. Watch me put this out, and then all of a sudden, here's a national guy going, "Oh, New Orleans Saints and Alvin Kamara are far apart." We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll step on my own toe and I'll stab a voodoo doll of myself for you if that happens. But I really think that the time that this really gets hashed out is at the beginning of training camp, when they're literally all in the same place and they have the ability to be able to work these things out. Holdouts are tough for NFL players now, thanks to the CBA. The NFLPA has like very little leverage. Coming from someone that was once a part of a very weak union, Actors Equity, I know a weak union when I see a weak union, and the NFLPA is a pretty weak union. And so they ended up losing some stuff in negotiations years ago that does not really make it conducive to hold out. It's like $50,000 fines every day. And then there's all the stacking and all this other stuff that could potentially be a part of that. Holdouts just aren't really a part of like the game anymore. Hold-ins are the new wave, right? That's the new vibe to where you walk in, you're there, but you ain't participating. You ain't working, but you're present. Hey, I'm here. Can't find me. I'm just here so I don't get fined. Marshawn Lynch, that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like that, right? Like Alvin Kamara's around, but he's not participating. They're doing the negotiations. Takes a few days, and the negotiations get done. I think the panic button, break glass in case of emergency thing happens if you get multiple weeks in the training camp and this has made no progress. At that point, that's where you start to get concerned. Then you start to wonder, like, what's the next step, right? Do you have to part ways? Do you just play 2024, knowing that 2024 has guaranteed money, knowing that 2024 has a pretty solid base salary of over $10 million? You just play 2024 and then wait to see what you do for 2025. Could be the other route. But before we worry about what to do if things don't go wrong or if things don't go right, let's focus on the fact that like things don't seem at this point, at the time of me recording this and saying this on the evening of July 11th, we should acknowledge that at this point, it doesn't sound like the things have gone too terribly wrong. And that's in and of itself, no news, good news. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much. As always, make a Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On Pelicans with my good friend Jake Madison, my other good friend Matt Moscona over at Locked On LSU, keeping you up to date with all the fantastic recruiting all over LSU sports. My goodness, they're cleaning up over there. So go and check out Locked On Pels and Locked On LSU for your second listen of the day. We appreciate you very much. As always, make a Locked On Saints part of your day, part of your routine. Saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.